What's going on, brothers and sisters? My name is Nico, and I upload a video to YouTube every day so I get better at communicating, better at speaking to the camera, and so I can talk about what I like. Recently, I've started reading the book The Will to Change. It's a feminist book. If you're a feminist, I feel like you've probably heard of it. It's mostly talking about how men are also damaged by the patriarchy. Anyways, as I was reading it, I was having some disagreements because at the end of the day, I don't want to identify as red pill or as someone that's traditional, because I believe identities just limit myself and limit my capacity to love and be fair. So I'm not going to say identify as a red pill or traditional person, but I have identified as one of those in the past. And so I was naturally coming up with things I was disagreeing with. And I don't know, I just talked to ChatGPT about it. We had a really interesting conversation. And right now I just asked it to be kind of like a podcast host and ask me questions so I can make this video right here. And in this way, it asks me thought-provoking questions. I say my thoughts. Hopefully you like and follow. Does that sound fair enough? All right, here we go. Your podcast style questions. Just answer in order. What made me start questioning my red pill beliefs in the first place? First of all, what the heck is red pill? I'll just identify. First of all, the term red pill comes from the movie The Matrix, where this one character gets the choice to either take the red pill or the blue pill. The red pill is the truth about the world. The blue pill is like the lies of the world, the easy, comforting lies. But the red pill is the harsh, brutal truth. So in the manosphere, which is, I don't know, like the online space where men talk about dating and self-improvement, the red pill is the harsh truth about women. The fact that nice guys finish last, and there's just a bunch of beliefs in there. A lot of people love the red pill. I think in mainstream society it's pretty hated and criticized, but part of the red pill honestly has helped me. It has, obviously, we could have the good things about the red pill without having the bad things. And what do I mean by good things? I mean getting me into the gym, making me more confident, empowering me a little bit. Of course, I'm not going to argue for the red pill right now. It has good and bad. We can form a new pill that has none of the bad and try to be the best we can. Okay, so what made me start questioning my red pill beliefs in the first place? I don't freaking know. Honestly, do you want me to pinpoint one moment in my life? I guess it was just a gradual accumulation of a million things that happened in my life. I started getting into the red pill because, I was a guy, I was insecure, I was looking up how can I get my crush to like me, how do I lose weight, how do I become more attractive, stuff like that. And naturally started consuming content, and that was a pipeline to the red pill, and that's how they got me. I need to sneeze. And over time, I don't know, I guess you could say that I tried changing. I did. I improved. I felt some pains. I felt betrayed. I consumed more content. There came a point where I was deep into self-improvement content, which is closely related to red pill content, especially for men. And I was doing really good habits, like going to the gym, doing my work, sleeping on time, getting my screen time down. But then I would have periods of letting all the good habits go and just eating junk food and staying in bed all day. So I would do like a week of really good habits, then 2 weeks of really bad habits, and 3 weeks of good habits, and 4 months of bad habits, and a month of good habits. It was just really inconsistent. And this period of time, I grew to hate the world. I was depressed. There was a million different reasons that I can't explain in this video, but I came to believe that I also started wrestling with my religion. And here's the biggest part. I began to question free will because I didn't believe that I had the will to change. Because change is so freaking hard. And when I talk to people about how hard it is to change, they automatically talk about me just making excuses. I'm just not working hard enough. I just gotta get a better mindset, bro. I just gotta be more positive, bro. But I almost felt like even though if I had a better mindset or if I worked harder or was more disciplined, I would most likely be able to achieve my dream outcomes. I almost I didn't have the right circumstances from childhood and genetics to be the type of person that can be more positive, the type of person that can be more disciplined. Whatever. It's people, every time I talk about free will, people always disagree with me, but whatever. I wrestled with that, and eventually I formed the belief that people are incredibly prideful and unfair, and that's why I started hating people. I hated humanity in general. I still loved my mom and my family and my friends. I had friends, surprisingly. Not surprisingly. Think of the worst human you can, your enemy. They probably have friends. Making friends is hard, but it's also not that hard, you know? So I just noticed that I'm still in the first question. Whatever. I thought everyone was prideful, and how did this me thinking everyone is prideful make me start questioning my beliefs in the first place? My red pill beliefs in the first place. I had to be consistent. If I called out people for being prideful and not being able to admit when they're wrong, then I have to admit myself, and that made me have to accept one of my core values, which is uncertainty. I am just a flimsy little human being who am I to know anything? Who am I to know free will? Who am I to know the ideal society? Who am I to know if God exists? I choose to believe certain things. I choose to believe in free will. I choose to believe in God. I choose to believe in Christianity. But at the end of the day, who am I to know? I think conviction in anything is dangerous. Conviction shouldn't be the default. The default should be, I don't know. Let's figure out the closest thing we can to the truth. And that ultimately led me to question a bunch of things. I've been liberal, I've been Democrat, I've been Republican, I've been conservative. And that's how, it's just an accumulation of many factors that get me to question my red pill beliefs. Okay, second question. Do you think the patriarchy was actually evil, or was it just a survival system that got outdated? I think even feminists agree with this one. I think patriarchy obviously started when we were apes, if you believe in that we came from monkeys, or if you're a Christian, you believe in Adam and Eve. Men were stronger, so they took on more physical roles, and women naturally started taking more roles, such as taking care of the children. And of course, it got to the point, especially in today's society, where we don't need to have strict roles based on purely physical or physical abilities. And then it's when it became about power. And I now agree that it is mostly about power, and men somehow got the good end of the stick, the one with the most power. And because humans are humans, they try to preserve that power in whichever way they could. It's not the right way to do it, and in a way, I am excusing men for being abusive here, but I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that it makes sense, and I feel like, honestly, if women were the stronger ones, there would have been a matriarchy, and they would have also abused power. But whatever. The reality is, men are in this position, and I agree with it as a red pill bro who's trying to be fair. Okay. And now, the next question is, why do so many people still follow traditional roles, even when they say they don't believe in them? Why do so many people still follow traditional roles, even when they say they don't believe in them? You know, the first thing that comes to mind is women being attracted to masculine men and men being attracted to feminine women. I think that's attraction is something primal, and even though women think that we want men to be sort of these in touch, this archetype that's in touch with their feelings, they're simply more attracted to the traditional masculine man. That's just the truth of it. And if we want, it's a big ask to get people to change. It's super easy to revolt and protest and complain and be a victim, which I'm not shaming you for being. It makes total sense you feel that way. But I do have to say that it's easier to be like that and feel that way instead of doing what's more likely to get you the dream outcome. What's the dream outcome? Being entirely selfless, working super hard, so working way harder than your gender roles limit you. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. I feel like I'm just talking out of my ass right now, trying to be entertaining and nuanced, but I could have answered most of these questions with one sentence. So I'm not gonna pretend I have to elaborate, that I can elaborate even when I can't. But yeah, that's why many people still follow traditional roles even when they don't think they're specifically right. It's because people aren't perfect, and it's honestly, people expect people to not be hypocrites, and people expect perfection from people often, and humans just can't. It's as simple as that. The next question is, what does it actually cost a guy to stand up against the patriarchy or tradition? This is something I actually do have a problem with feminists. They praise and celebrate guys that are feminist, of course. It makes sense. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I do have a problem with is judgment as a whole. You guys are resentful, and it makes sense. Why wouldn't you be? Everything that's happened in your life. I believe every emotional reaction can be explained, and therefore, I don't know if justified or excused is the right word. It's probably not. But certain things had to happen for certain responses to come about. Women have to have felt immense pain and suffering and resentment for them to feel justified in the shame of men and making them their enemies. Do I believe that's right? No. I believe you will achieve more progress. I'm sorry, I have to criticize you, and maybe I'm wrong. If you take your pride and ego down and try to study psychology and persuasion and find men's motivations and find why men are the way that they are, if you do all those things, you're going to be more likely to cause real change. Or, I don't know, if the current system, there's not many women in positions of power. If every single woman out there all of a sudden became an extremely hard worker and completely outperformed men in every way, the stereotypes and injustices would go away. And in a way, they are going away. Women, I feel like, are better catered to in the education system. Women are graduating college and attending college at higher rates than men. And I'm someone that criticizes college quite a bit. But the question earlier was, what does it actually cost a guy to stand up against the patriarchy or tradition? It costs a lot. I think ChatGPT is asking this question because I brought up a point of women expect, like, in this situation, say there's a mom, a dad, and me. My dad is this super evil patriarch, and my mom is the sweet, defenseless victim. And my dad is yelling at my mom. I love my dad. He's been nice to me. He's a little sexist. He's very sexist. I'm not talking about my real family, by the way. I love both of them. But, and I want my dad to like me. Feminists and people in general, this is not just feminists, human in general make this sort of betrayal all the time. But they expect me to stand up to my dad and ruin my relationship with him so I can be on the good side of history and side with my mom and defend her. I mean, that might be the right thing to do, but many of us just don't take into account how hard it is. And not just that, just men aren't even aware of what the patriarchy is. And they have good reasons to care, but they can't see them. And if they're not aware of it, if they're ignorant, because not being aware of something pretty much just means being ignorant. If you're ignorant to something, if you're ignorant to a problem, then you simply won't change. You won't do anything about the problem, and you'll live life the same. It's also a problem that feminists it's also a problem that feminists use certain language that causes trigger words in men to automatically dismiss you. The best example I can do with this is that if this is super unpopular and Christians won't agree with me, but I believe you can lead people closer to Christ if you start talking about love and Christian values without saying the word Jesus or God. Because when you say the word Jesus or God, people automatically label you a Christian freak or, I don't know, God freak. In the same way, if you use words like patriarchy and misogyny, you're likely to cause automatic responses within men that dismiss you, even though you are completely right. So in a way, we just have to learn to persuade better and find common ground and concede points and be prideless and loving, which is super hard. This is a huge ask, you know? Okay, whatever. I'm gonna go to this question. It's not a question, but it's something I remember that I want to touch on. I believe that dismantling the patriarchy is good, but what are we going to replace it with? No matter what you say, there is no perfect system. And if you do believe in if you guys all agree on a perfect system, what are the odds you're going to execute it right? Like, for example, communism, socialism, it has good intentions and wants people to be equal, but humans are simply too imperfect and humans are way too human for that to be a good system. People are greedy. People are going to want to abuse people. And they just, I don't know. Sure, let's dismantle the patriarchy. Me, a traditional ex-red pill bro, can agree with that. I just want the best. But one more thing. Dismantling the patriarchy pretty much involves not talking about gender roles, like boys can paint their nails, women can be into sports. And you know, when I think of, literally before I read this book 2 days ago, when I was thinking of boys painting their nails, that would have probably triggered an automatic response in me to think, oh, that guy's probably a little fruity, that guy is weird. And at the end of the day, if I'm as prideless as I can be, I gotta admit that there's nothing really inherently wrong with that. But it's hard to admit because we're just so conditioned to think that's weird. And yes, we should rise above the conditioning, but simply shaming men or people for being conditioned the way that they are, shaming in general, judgment in general, isn't a good way to progress society. Okay, but like I was saying, dismantling the patriarchy and doing what you feminists want, at the end of the day, you may not agree with this, but I think it's logically coherent. You want to eliminate any forms of distinction. It looks like if we dismantle the patriarchy, maybe a million years, sorry, my dog's on the door, maybe a million years down the line, in the way that humans reproduce, there's not gonna be men and women, but there's one default human being. And you know, instead of saying when boys grow up into men, or when women or when girls grow up into women, we're gonna say when kids grow up into adults. Maybe there's not gonna be, since there's no man or woman anymore, there's not gonna be kids and adults. And adults is really far-fetched, but that's what you want. Logically and coherently, that's what you're leaning towards too. Maybe you're gonna say that we're gonna draw a line somewhere. But this is what convinced me the most. This is what convinced me to concede a lot of points to you guys and sort of now consider myself a feminist, kind of. Is that I think that is, because I believe in God and Christianity, I believe that it makes perfect sense that there's a chance that's how Jesus and God from the Bible intended things to be. For humans, for us all to stop having differences whatsoever. Literally, there's no man or woman, but come as one. I was talking with ChatGPT. I can't articulate everything too well because I'm just a human, silly billy human who still needs to practice articulating his thoughts. But it was just talking about love. The book that I'm reading, The Will to Change, talks about love a lot. So ChatGPT was bringing up love a lot. And it makes sense. It's coherent with my beliefs that I believe God and Jesus is love more than a sky daddy in the sky, or more than a human. Jesus is more love than he is human. That's an unpopular opinion in Christianity too. But it also is coherent with other theories that have made sense to me in my head, that we're all just humans trying to learn and be, and eventually we're finding our way back to God, and that's how we're gonna do it. We're literally gonna stop being man and woman, and we're gonna be human. It's not gonna be black and white. There's some Bible quote I don't remember. There's not gonna be man or woman, Hebrew or slave or something. There's just gonna be one under heaven. Maybe that's heaven. Maybe heaven, and I think that's how humanity slowly progresses into heaven in the end times. I think liberalism and being progressive is how we get there. And by the way, a lot of you guys are gonna hate on me, Christians and feminists. I'm just trying to articulate thoughts. Don't hate me too much, I honestly. Whatever, we're all gonna be one. And I think dismantling the patriarchy, and I finally got my, instead of having such strict identities and tribalism, and identifying with certain things and clinging on and attaching ourselves to our egos and our need to be right, we're going to be one. And I came to this conclusion by detaching myself from my pride and ego and admitting that maybe it's okay that boys paint their nails. But at the same time, feminists, I'm not going to concede this much. I still agree with a lot of traditional things that I will just talk about later. Whatever. This is the end of the video. God bless you. If you believe in love, or that all things happen for a reason, or anything of the sort, then you're closer to believing in God than you think. If you believe in love, you already believe in God, because God is love.